usual and talk a little bit about the playoffs. So we've seen some crazy games over Wild Card Weekend, and a couple of them have had some, in my mind, some things that have made me, think about the Jets and reflect on this Jets season and the Jets organization as a whole. And so I want to start with one of the bigger upset games of the weekend. The Packers going into Dallas, beating the Dallas Cowboys, whose vaunted defense everyone said was playoff tested. And Jordan Love had an amazing game. He was, dicing them up out there. Unbelievable. So, Paul, my question is to you, did the Packers win the trade?
Oh, man, that's that's a heavy question. I will say, you touched on defense, and like one of my big takeaways from the playoff game so far has just been that defense is great, but at the end of the day, you need to be able to score, right? We saw Cleveland fall down. We saw Dallas fall down. I think Kansas City is the only, really upper echelon defense that really stood tall and kind of stifled an opponent in the playoffs here. And I think a lot of that probably had to do with weather and the fact that Miami had to travel and they kind of had the rug pulled out from under them, where they were thinking that they were going to be playing in Miami for several weeks, and then all of a sudden they're playing in negative 30 weather. Man, on this question specifically, did the Packers win the trade? Look, I think it's probably too early to know. We're probably going to need to get through we need to get through more than 4 plays. So I'll tell you flat out, I can't answer this question yet because we need to get through more than 4 plays to be able to know. And we have to see what the Packers do with the pick that they got from us. We're already kind of in the hole for a number of reasons, right? Number one, we lost out on Broderick Jones. So there's one strike. Number two, Jordan Love has won a playoff game already. The Packers are obviously better than us, and we've got nothing out of Aaron Rodgers so far. So as it stands right now, I think the answer to your question is yes. Big picture, there's a lot to be seen. How many years is he going to play here? Are we going to extend him again? How much are we getting out of this? Are we getting multiple playoff games? Are we getting a one and done? Are we actually winning anything? So there's a lot kind of still, I think, to be determined there on that. But I will say this. I saw a tweet, and it was from a Bears fan, actually, over the weekend. And it was, just kind of about, Jordan Love and Justin Fields. And, the basic point was that, the Packers draft this kid. They make him sit for 4 years. And the way it was worded was the Packers took a quarterback that could barely complete a pass in the Mountain West and made him legit. The Bears draft a 5-star that annihilated the Clemson Tigers in the college football playoffs and ruined them. And people still don't understand it's an organizational thing, right? And so when you frame it that way, and I immediately thought of the Jets when I saw that tweet. I know it's a Bears tweet, and the Bears are a lot like us in a lot of ways. But I immediately thought of the Jets, and like when you put it in that framework, it doesn't matter who gets traded to us. Like, we're always going to lose the trade because we don't have the infrastructure in place to support healthy play and build around players and accentuate their strengths. And we don't have coaches that do that stuff, right? So when you put it in those terms, it's like, it's hard to ever win a trade because we just don't have what it takes. And obviously we're going to get more into that when we do our little quarterback docuseries. Like, a lot of this is organizational. And I feel like, and look, we're going to do the work, and we're going to dig in, and we're going to watch the films, and we're going to watch old games, and we're going to like really try to pull out some stuff so that we're not just like spouting thoughts about these 5 quarterbacks. But I feel like the answer we're going to get to at the end of the day is that this organization doesn't support good quarterbacks, right? And it almost doesn't matter who the player is. It's about what you put around them. And the Packers have proven over the last 35, almost 40 years now that they can put good things around quarterbacks and elevate them and make them better. And I go back to that quote from Saleh when he drafted Wilson that said, we're going to lift you. It's not the other way around. Like, the Jets have never done that. We've never done that. That was a crazy thing to say. Other teams do that. We don't do that. So I don't know, man. Right now, no, we haven't won the trade. The Packers have definitely won the trade, but there's more to be seen. So let's hold out hope.
I would say the only way a Jets fan could rationally argue that we won the trade, because, Rodgers was going to leave the Packers, if not for the Jets, for someone else. And if they didn't end up trading him, they weren't going to re-sign him. They were going to transition to Jordan Love eventually. So the way that I would argue the Jets win the trade is winning a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. That is what it comes down to now. It's not about like getting us back to playoff relevance and all that stuff, because I mean, like, it is for us, but it's still not a net win on the trade unless we literally win a championship, and the Packers don't with Jordan Love. That's to me where I see it now. Obviously, like, it could end up being mutually beneficial, but like to truly be like, oh, we got the best of the Packers in this deal, we need a Super Bowl now, which wasn't necessarily, it was the idea going into the trade. I don't think it was necessarily like if Jordan Love stunk, we absolutely would have won the trade. So like, even without Rodgers playing, I feel like you could kind of take a caveat here. Obviously, can't win the trade if you trade for him and he never plays. But if Jordan Love wasn't, dicing up high quality defenses, like, we could very easily be making an argument that right now, like, it was worth it just to get Aaron Rodgers, and like, oh my God, how much do Packers fans miss him right now? The truth is they really don't. And like, we really do. So please get healthy, Aaron, so that hopefully we can come back and say that this was a win-win and not a cataclysmic error by Joe Douglas down the line.
Yeah, you're right, man. And I'm glad you put it in those bold terms, because that's really the truth. We have to win a Super Bowl or it was all for naught. And I'm trying to think back to 2008. I can't remember feeling like the Packers were angry. Like, Packers fans this past season were rooting for our demise. Like,
For sure.
there was the whole thing with like the bar that was going to buy free drinks every time the Jets lost or whatever it was. Like, there's all this stuff that the Packers were like gunning. Packers fans were gunning for us this year. And I can't remember if that was the case in 2008. I don't feel like it was. And so you're right, with all that's around it, there's really only one answer.
Yeah. I think too, you mentioned too, you were talking about defenses in the playoffs and how really offense is the only thing that matters. I very much agree with this take. I will caveat it with like, two of the teams that you mentioned, obviously the Browns and the Cowboys, gave up pick sixes. So like, obviously like that impacts the final score, but it's becoming more and more clear to me. And we're going to talk about Salah at the end of this podcast, but it's becoming more and more clear to me that like the whole defense wins championship saying is like kind of outdated in today's NFL. Like, the offense is significantly more important, and having a coach who is obviously, Mike McDaniel struggled, but having a coach who is a mastermind of an offense is, having a coach and a quarterback, I should say, is a critical aspect of winning these playoff games. And two of the teams that accomplished that were the Texans and the Detroit Lions. And not only did they, construct phenomenal rosters and put good offensive minds behind defensive culture bringing coaches in order to elevate those rosters. But credit to our friend NYJ Matt over on Twitter. He pointed out that 2 years ago, the 5 worst teams in the NFL were, and I can't remember the exact order, but the Jags, the Jets, the Giants, the Texans, and the Lions. All 4 of them, besides the New York Jets, have won a playoff game in the last 2 years. The mantra that Salah and Douglas keep preaching about, we inherited a mess and it's going to take time, and like, we started so far behind the 8 ball and we're just building and building this up. Like, I think it was Meigs who said in the Badlands group that like one day the Jets are going to stop comparing themselves to themselves and actually start comparing themselves to the rest of the league, which is like a wake up call we need, because all these things the Jets are saying about how no one does it like this and we're building the right way. You look around the league and other teams are building, I don't know, the wrong way and winning playoff games. So maybe it's our way that's wrong, because the Texans and Lions showed that, you can turn this shit around quickly. And it's about damn time the Jets realize that they should be the ones doing that. And that should be an institutional, organizational pressure that comes from up top, from Woody Johnson, that we need to be one of these teams that absolutely turns it around next season.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that day comes, right? Like, it's a nice thing to say that like one day we're going to do that. I mean, I hope so. Like, I'm tired of it. That point, like halfway through the year this year, when those leaks started to come out and people started to talk about how bad the roster was again, was so embarrassing, dude. Like, it was so embarrassing. Like, obviously, everybody remembers how bad the roster was. And by the way, how bad that roster was, like, Blake Cashman's on a playoff team making plays. Neville Hewitt is on a playoff team making plays. Joe Flacco led a team to the postseason. Like, these guys are all dotted around the NFL, and a lot of them are doing okay. Frankie Louvu is another one we talked about a few weeks ago, who's like on a bad team, but doing pretty well for the Panthers. Like, that whole bereft of talent thing, like, I'm not even sure it was accurate at the time anymore. The team was bad, but was it that the team was bereft of talent, or was it just that the guys hadn't had a chance to show who they are because the team and the organization is so bad? And so, like, I do hope that day comes, but I'm not, like, nothing is indicating that that day is going to come. It's pathetic.
So the only I get, I'll end on like a positive. I shouldn't say the only positive, but the most positive thing to come out of this wild card weekend for Jets fans was obviously the demise of the Miami Dolphins, who were fraudulent, in my opinion, throughout this entire season. Um, with the Lions win, Miami now has the biggest playoff win drought. The Jets haven't made the playoffs in, what is it, 12 years? Miami hasn't won a playoff game in 24 years, which is an insane statistic. What are your thoughts on the Dolphins' loss to the Chiefs?
Yeah, not surprising. That was a buzzsaw they were walking into with the weather, with the draw that they got, with how their season kind of ended, on that. Buffalo came out of nowhere to overtake them in the division. That was obvious, right? Like, that was the easiest call of the weekend, I think. Yeah, I mean, I'm tired. I'm tired of Miami fans acting like they're some kind of good organization. Like, they're, they're terrible, dude. They haven't won anything ever. Even when they had Marino, they weren't that good, right? Like, they've never been good. And I think people who people who know football are able to look at Tua and see that at a minimum he's a flawed player, and that the speed element of their game is fun and it's exciting to watch. And when they're throwing 70 up on Denver, like, okay, cool, but like, there's that was a flawed team. It was easy to see what they were headed for. And one thing that kind of struck me was that I saw a graphic that wins in the AFC East, against teams who finished with winning records among the Jets, Pats, and Miami. The Jets had 3, the Pats had 2, Miami had 1. And while that's a fun thing to dunk on for Miami, and say, it was something that everybody was talking about all year. Like, Miami hasn't beaten anybody good, over and over and over again. We heard it all year. So that's kind of old news, right? The thing that I took away from this is that Miami's in the playoffs because they beat up on bad teams like they're supposed to. The Jets didn't, right? That's why we're not there. Played a bunch of good games against good teams. That's fine. We didn't win all of them that we should have. We probably should have beaten the Chiefs. And so we went 4-4 against teams that finished under 500. And so, like, that's what good teams do, is that they beat up on the teams that they're supposed to beat up on. And credit to Miami, they did that all year, but they got exposed in the playoffs. And so, like, next year, we talk about this all the time where the Jets play up and down to their competition. Like, I would just like to be a team next year who just goes out when we're playing a bad team and just throws up 45 on them, holds them to 10 points, and we're good. Like, that's what good teams do, is they just take care of the teams that they're supposed to take care of. So while it was like fun to look at that graphic a little bit, it also kind of made me think of the other half of that, which is that if you only finished 7-10 and you had 3, quality wins, that means you didn't do too good against teams that you were supposed to beat.
It's a very fair point. So let's get talking about some of the Jets drama that's gone on. The biggest storyline surrounding the New York Jets heading into the offseason surrounds offensive line coach Keith Carter, who the Jets hired after he was fired from Tennessee. He had a history of let's just call it like bad player relations. Like, there were many Tennessee offensive linemen who came out and spoke against him prior to him getting hired by the Jets. In the offseason, there's been a lot of talk about getting rid of Keith Carter with Mekhi Becton making comments on Instagram, Brees Hall making comments on Twitter. Paul, I'm interested. You obviously, you follow all the um, quotes and media surrounding the team pretty much closer than anyone. What are your thoughts on this whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, I said this at the top. Like, I wish that the players would put down their phones a little bit. Like, there's it puts a level of exposure out there that I'm not sure is helpful. And I'm not, by the way, I'm not like a no fun guy. Like, I'm not like, hey, like, don't do anything except play football and practice football. Like, do your thing, dude. Play video games, do whatever you want to do. Like, have a life, have a personality. That's all great. But when it comes to kind of exposing publicly things that probably shouldn't be exposed publicly, like, there's a time and a place. Like, you got to put your phone down and you got to stop tweeting. And like, did the Sauce Gardner back and forth with Asante Samuel Sr., like, did it make me laugh a little bit? Yeah. Is Sauce right pretty much about everything he's saying? Yeah. But also, like, just you're not helping, dude. Like, you're not helping. And I look at a guy like Garrett Wilson, who they like pressed him in his year-end press conference to talk about how good his season was, and he was just like, "This was the worst year of my life. Like, I hated this. I don't care about anything personal in terms of yards or receptions or anything like that. Like, this was horrible." And so I'd love to see more of that, and less of the tweeting, just like nonsense. And it really, like, the Keith Carter thing is the biggest example of it, of like, Brees Hall and Mekhi Becton don't need to be tweeting like crying laughing face emojis when people are talking shit about when Taylor Lewan is talking shit about Keith Carter, because there is a lot of smoke there for several years now. And like, if you go back like 5 or 6 years, Tennessee had an incredible rushing attack. Like, they had a great offensive line. So like, I think the guy probably can coach. I think there's like something in there that is good, and he's earned a reputation among other coaches. He continues to get jobs, et cetera, et cetera. But obviously, like, there's something missing in terms of player relations, like you said. And so um, the fact that it's out there now in the ether is a little bit scary. If players are feeling comfortable enough to take shots like that. And the other thing is, like, they were just vague enough that, like, you can't really pin Brees Hall or Mekhi Becton to a wall about, are you talking shit about Keith Carter? Um, it was just vague enough that could almost be passed off as something else, or, hey, this was an inside joke, or, hey, you didn't understand, or you misinterpreted, or whatever the case may be, right? But the what they didn't do was, when Taylor Lewan was talking shit about Keith Carter, go and defend their coach, which is pretty damning and in itself, right? And so, like, when we're talking about like inside locker room team issues, it almost feels to me like it's something that has to be reconsidered. If they had their end of the year meetings and they said, Keith Carter's staying, we're rolling with him, it's all good, everything's fine, and then like this stuff happens in like the immediate 2 or 3 days after that, I almost feel like you have to take a second look at that and say, we already have kind of a tenuous situation here. Are we still really just going to say that Aaron Rodgers comes back and fixes everything and everything's okay?
So,
Or are we going to try to make some material changes to the coaching staff?
is that not the situation we're in though? Because like my understanding was they came out and said like we're not changing anything about the offensive coaching staff, which again we'll get to in a second is fucking ridiculous when you look at the offensive coaching staff. Then the players had this stuff on Twitter where they were very actively, call it subtle in one way or another, but like I'm pretty sure Mekhi Becton just commented like the 100 emoji on like a quote of Taylor Lewan being like Keith Carter sucks. So like it could be subtle, but like there's pretty much only one way to interpret that. And then like a day later, Connor Hughes asked Saleh like, "What's the deal with Keith Carter?" And he's like, "I'm standing by Keith, of all the faith in the world." Which like, Saleh's gonna ride or die for his guys, like you said. But I would say two things. One, just to really quickly, like I love Sauce dunking on Asante Samuel. I know you found it funny too. I understand that what you're saying is like business. There's a way of doing business and being done in house. My counter take, and the reason that I'm on a different side of that, especially when it comes to the Keith Carter stuff, is maybe not with Mikhail because like who knows if he'll be on the team next year. But if you're a guy like Brees and you're sitting there on your rookie contract when you're like supposed to be part of this window, and we have Aaron Rodgers and we're doing, this is it. This is like the time that, especially while I'm on my rookie contract and especially as a running back while I have my freshest legs, like this is my window to hopefully maximize my capacity at getting one free agent payday. If I'm an offensive player on the Jets and I'm hearing Saleh be like, nope, everything's fine. We're just going to get Aaron Rodgers back and like everything will be totally different. Like my only recourse at this point is to speak out. And like maybe they said some shit behind closed doors, but Saleh very publicly is like being like, we're doing nothing. And I like, if they said something behind closed doors, like great, but like I am fully for the Jets best offensive players being like shit needs to change. And if the coaches won't do it and Woody is not going to fire the coaches, then like the players need to step up in this instance. And like, is it dysfunctional? Absolutely. Like I wish we weren't an organization where the players had to be like, guys, like what the fuck are we doing here? But I agree with what they're saying. So like I'll take that dysfunction if it causes the right changes.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point, right? And I think that's where I get tripped up. So I'll add this caveat is that if they went to the coaching staff or to Joe D or to Saleh or whoever, and they said, "Hey, I've got a problem with this guy," right? And if Lineman went and did that, and Brees went and did that, if there was a player committee, quorum, whatever you want to call it, if there was a group of guys that went to the coaching staff and said, "Hey, this guy stinks and he's a jerk and we don't want him around here anymore. We think, and they laid out an argument, right? And Saleh blew him off or was disingenuous with them and said, yeah, I'll look at it. And then went out in the media and said, I'm standing by my guy, right? Tweet away, right? And so as long as that happened, I'm totally cool with it. But I think that before any tweets ever get sent out, like that needs to happen. And do I believe that the organization is healthy enough where that did for sure happen? I don't know, man. Like, and if going to Twitter is your only means of communication, like inside of a family, right? You need to talk about those things. You can't just make like side shot comments. Like that's not how healthy relationships work. So if they did have that conversation, all good in my book. If you didn't, like Saleh doesn't have Twitter, dude. So you're relying on some media member like relaying that to him now, which is not a healthy situation.
For sure. So let's get into the coaching carousel stuff and then we can end on the last.
Before we get to that, I just wanted to kind of spin from that Keith Carter point into this Giants report that came out from Hughes a little bit.
Okay,
so
perfect.
like,
let's go to that.
So I saw this. Wink got let go last week, and then like there was a story that bubbled out right afterwards that was like, Wink. I talked to some Giants fan friends about this, and they were like, basically the situation was that like Wink has these two guys that work for him that are like his errand boys, right? And there was like some kind of nonsense going on where Dable believed that these two guys that worked for Wink were the leak that happened mid-season when there started to be things leaking out about the Giants. And, we started to hear some ugly stuff about the inside of that organization. And so day after the season, Dable lets them go. And then Wink's like, basically like, you can't touch my staff, power struggle, Wink's gone. Right. And so dust kind of settles on that. And then a couple days later, we get a pretty like explosive report here, talking about a lot of dysfunction. And the Jets were mentioned a few times, which made me really happy. I guess like Dable was yelling at Wink in the headset, like, you're going to lose this game for me, like you lost the Jets game for me. Was like, yeah, go ahead.
By the way, Wink famously was the one who decided to kick a 60-yard field goal as opposed to going for it on 4th and 1 for that game. But please continue.
Right, exactly. Right. And that's the funniest part about it is like taking zero ownership that like you put in Tommy DeVito in that game. And we clearly saw later on down the line that like Tommy DeVito can play a little bit. If you give him a structure to play inside of, he can play a little bit. And Tyrod Taylor got hurt in that game. you did not throw the ball once. And then you put all this stuff on Wink, right? By the way, like, I'm not going to act like Wink is probably an easy guy to get along with. He comes from that whole rec school that's like, those dudes are loud, they're in your face, they blitz 1,000 times a game. Like, that's a certain personality and it's a certain play style that I'm sure is difficult to coexist with. And that's why people don't think Rex can be a defensive coordinator again, because he has been a head coach. He's been the guy in front of the microphone. And so I'm sure that there's some difficulty there, right? But what has come out is like other assistants don't want to go work for the Giants now. People who do work for the Giants are texting their friends and saying, "Don't come work here. Don't try to get a job here. It's awful." Dable's screaming at Wink in the headset to the point where he can't even get calls in. And I just think, first of all, it's worth noting on this Jets show, because I think in this city, we get a lot of shit for being like this dysfunctional organization who can't get out of their own way. And for the last like 15 years, they've been pretty bad too. And so we don't often get these like explosive things kind of hitting the media about the Giants, right? By and large, people just think, oh, like, it's just this respectable organization and they've struggled a little bit and like they'll get back on the right track. And everything that comes out about the Jets is, a dumpster fire. And so I think, first of all, it was nice to just be on the other side of it for once and be able to read about that a little bit. Second of all, I think that, you know, it goes to show that like when there's blood in the water and when there's a report out like that, whether it's true or not, how dangerous that can be in terms of other people. Like, it was written right in the article that people might not want to come there. And I think that's something the Jets have been flirting with on and off for a long time. And they have to really be careful about it, because we're in a tenuous spot right now where a lot of people don't believe in the GM. A lot of people don't believe in the head coach. Nobody believes in the offensive staff. And good football player or not, Rodgers is a polarizing figure, and we're expecting a lot out of him in terms of fixing a lot of these issues and covering up a lot of these warts. So I think it was just kind of a poignant report to read. Number one, I took some joy in it, but number two, like, it goes to show that like we really got to be careful as an organization in the next few months.
100%. And I do agree with your point that if uh you know if Jeff Ulbrich or